Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for spending your hour with us today for our Wednesday webinar series. My name is Alice Fox, and I am the Director of Talent Delivery at Talent Connections. If you would please, in the chat, if you could just say hello, that you're here, that we see you, and when you're populating in, if you could just say hello and where you're coming from. We have a lot of great people that are coming in here, and we're excited for all the great chat that we're getting. Hello to Miranda. Hello. And tell us where you're from too, because Tara actually is in Blairsville area and Janae is in Mississippi. So yeah, so please tell us where you're from, and we're excited that you all are here today. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This is a 1-hour recorded webinar. If you have any technical questions, please feel free to email me there, and I can at alicefox@talentconnections.net. Participants will be muted, but as we've said, the question and answer and chat functions are available for sure. So please feel free to jump in there, and we will be monitoring the chat and answering questions that you have or comments. So definitely, I cannot emphasize this enough that will be an interactive webinar today. They actually have a very cool, super cool QR code that they're going to be using that will scan as one of their very first scans. That one, you can follow along with the webinar on your phone. Two, you can screenshot or keep any of the slides that they have. And three, that you can also, they'll be doing question and answers through there. So any questions that they pose to us, we can answer it, and then it will come up on the screen and we can see it. So definitely make sure that you have your phone ready to go to scan that QR code. Also, as always, this webinar is approved for 1 SHRM professional development credit, and we will be having that, we'll give that code at the end. So today I am pleased to introduce Tara Morgan. As a former corporate lawyer, Tara has served as a culture champion and has a strong ability to build a team around a common vision that ties directly to the organizational mission. Tara holds a BS degree in management from the University of South Alabama, and she completed her MBA in Atlanta, Georgia at Troy State University, and earned her Juris Doctorate at Western State College of Law in Fullerton, California. She teaches undergraduate business law and policy at Young Harris College. Tara has worked across diverse industries, including nonprofits, healthcare, banking, public utility, manufacturing, law, and service. She has led corporate governance through board committees, specifically compliance, compensation, executive search. Janae McDonald is the owner of Edge Consulting, LLC, based out of Long Beach, Mississippi. Edge provides human capital consulting services to include employee training and development and related human resource activities to a variety of organizations. Janae has almost 30 years of experience working in human resources in various roles and has served as an adjunct instructor for several universities, teaching business-related courses on the undergraduate and graduate level. She is happiest when she can help individuals learn and grow, which in turn improves their organizations. Janae has her PhD in Human Capital Development, Master's in Workforce Training and Development, and a Bachelor's in HR Management. In addition to her HR certification, she is also a certified training professional. Thank you so much. We're so excited to have both Tara and Tara and Janae, and we are looking forward to this session for sure. So take it away.
Good morning. I see we've got a Miranda, a fellow USA grad. Go Jags. Strangely enough, that is where Tara and I met many, many years ago. Tara and I have known each other since we both had black hair. And it's been a minute for that. So as I was thinking about this and you kind of look through our experience, I was thinking about how combined we have about 60 years of HR experience. That's a lot. I was thinking, man, like our experience is just about ready to retire, right? So understand that when we go through this information today, there's so much information to talk about, and we have 40 minutes. So we're really trying to hit the high points. As Alice said, it's going to be interactive. So to kind of get to that point, if you're interested, you don't have to do this, but to kind of aid with the interactivity part, You can scan this QR code so that you can join the session online. Now, it will not let you progress through the slides until I progress through the slides, but as we have the interactive element with the questions, you'll be able to answer the questions and your answers will show up on the screen. So you can either QR code it or you can go to the website and enter that code. So I'm going to give y'all just a minute to do that.
We kind of went through this earlier, and it was so cool to see it come up right on our phone and be able to be so interactive. So I love this, and I'm going to suggest it going forward to presenters for sure, because it's a
It is.
great tool
It's
to
a very
use.
cool tool. And I will say when I used it last September for a day-long class, I mean, that one of the highest compliments I got was like, oh, the use of technology was so cool. So
Yes,
by all
I
means, steal it and use it.
I agree. This was excellent.
It's so cool. And then to see it all populate as we go through it. But we'll get started. These are our objectives. We're going to just kind of talk about similarities between succession planning and strategic planning, investigate, talk about different approaches to succession planning, talk a little bit about the succession planning process, talk about the importance of evaluation. Everything we do probably needs to be evaluated as HR people. And then also kind of talk about some of the specific vulnerabilities that you might be subject to. And I will say you should have gotten yesterday, since you registered, you should have gotten a handout from Alice. Just meant to be a guide to kind of help you, and a couple of tools that we will talk about today as we walk through it. So that's, you should be able to use that. And we created the handout and then kind of trimmed some of the information. So there might be some information on the handout that we don't necessarily go over, but you still have it, right? So just as a kind of reference point.
They're hoping you would put the contact in the chat if that's possible. If not,
I can.
back.
Yes, I can go back. Yes, thank you. I did not see that. There we go. Here, and while it's pulled up, I'll go ahead and do it here. So we'll have it.
Yeah, I was going to say I couldn't grab it fast enough on my phone. It wouldn't let me go back either, so I couldn't help.
And then
That's a great idea, Monty, to put it in the
Yes.
chat.
8465. Yes, 3905-8465. Okay. Yes. Wait, that says just to y'all. Let me say to everyone. Sorry, it just went to host and panelist. Let me try that again. We thought we were getting the technical difficulties out of the way today, but we clearly didn't. Hold
Yes,
on
we
1 second.
tried. We tried to get them all, but
That's right.
It's all right. It's great information.
3905-8465. Okay, that should show to everybody. I don't think the first one did.
Yeah, perfect. It's in for everybody now.
Okay, great. So everybody should have been able to join. Our objectives, these are the things that we want to talk about. And as a side note, you know, Tara and I both offer this class on a regular basis. And I know it's, for me in particular, when I do it, it's 8 hours. So we really are trying to hit the high notes today. So one of the things we want you to think about is, and this is not a quiz question, this is really just to kind of get your mind going. But if someone were to ask you about your organization and what business were you in, a lot of times people can rattle off the mission statement and those kinds of things that are typically this long. But one of the things that I really want to task you with doing today is to think about the business that you're in, and then can you condense that down to 5 words or less? To really get at what your purpose is, because you have to know what your purpose is, what you're trying to accomplish before you figure out how you're going to accomplish it. So think about that. That's your homework. See if you can condense it, what business you're really in, into 3 to 5 words. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tara for a minute.
Great. One of the things we like to do is draw a distinction between strategic planning and succession planning. So strategic planning is really what we are going to do as an organization. It's often a 3-year plan now. It used to be you could say we were going to have a 5 to 10-year plan. Things are changing so fast. And I was just in a strategic planning meeting yesterday, and they said it's hard to even do it for 3 years now because technology is changing so fast. And the economies are changing so fast. So again, having a 3-year strategic plan that really defines what your organization is going to do will be the foundation, but then will pair nice to the question of who is going to do that. And so we're going to spend most of the time talking about obviously succession planning. That's why you signed up for this class. And then we're going to really dive into the pieces of that. But oftentimes businesses get hung up on, or at least HR professionals get hung up on, I need to get people bought into this. Well, if you have a people first portion of your strategic plan, then this marries nicely. If, however, you work for a company, which I have had the luxury of doing sometimes in my career, with an organization that doesn't put people in their strategic plan, which is bizarre to me, given that it's hard to imagine how we can strategically plan without talking about people. Then this is a little bit more of an uphill battle, but it's still doable because you can really start to see from a gap analysis that we'll talk later, how you can prepare your senior leaders to really understand the need for succession planning. Again, we need to prioritize our need, understand the key positions, and then we start to look at filling those gaps. So really, what is succession planning? I wish this was an interactive slide, but we, again, trying to minimize our time here. It is an ongoing process. And when Janae and I were preparing for this, one of the things we wanted to make sure we imparted is this is not a one and done kind of system. This is an ongoing, systematically identifying of individuals in your organization that can help, or outside your organization that can help in moving your organization forward. Again, defining what you need is more important, and then we can decide who is going to help us do that. Okay.
And so when we kind of think about why we care, I'm sure that most of your organizations care about retention, right? You care about making sure that your operations continue no matter what. So we have to think about retirements, we think about turnover, we have to think about all of those things and what we will do when those things happen. You really have to think about succession planning. It is not for every position within the organization. It is for the mission critical positions. And it's real easy to say, well, every position is mission critical. And no, it's not. There are positions, though, that if something were to happen to the person in that role, that operations would maybe not necessarily cease, but there would be a serious disruption. I work with a client right now that is one of the largest, what is the largest franchisees for a fast food organization. And last year, their CFO died unexpectedly. So not only were they then dealing with the loss of a colleague and friend, but like they had no succession plan in place. And so there was a lot of scrambling at that point. So we want to make sure that we do what we can and plan to make sure that we're able to meet those strategic plans because we have the people in place. So first question, take a quiz here with your phone. You should answer the question. Does your organization currently have a succession plan? No, yes, yes, but it needs updating. Okay. So this is probably anecdotal, and I can't cite my source, but I did a little research that said only about 35% of organizations have succession plans. 35%.
And I suspect part of that is because it is complicated to get up and off the ground. And so oftentimes you might get started, as some people say, we have done a little bit, but it needs updating. It is the momentum of keeping that on a regular review cycle and making sure that it is something that's embedded in who you are as an organization is more challenging.
It's part of that culture. And it's one of those things like we'll get to it later. And then something happens and you're like, oh, sugar, we should have done this before, right? So we're going to assume that everybody has answered that wants to answer to stay on time. So it's a pretty good, split there. We've got, a third that say, no, they don't have it. Yes, fourth that do. And then 3 that say, yeah, but it needs a little bit of updating. So that's interesting. There we go. And Tara's going to talk a little bit about the process.
So it's funny when Janae and I compared the trainings that we do collectively, we both had an exact slide like this, which is the process. And I think that goes to what we were trying to say before. It is a continual process. It is not linear. It does not stop. It sort of, once you get started, it should continue. And this represents that. So again, number one, gaining commitment. If you have, again, an organization that has a people first commitment, this gaining commitment piece may be less difficult than if you have an organization that is not really committed to developing individuals or doesn't see sort of the down the road strategic initiative that needs to be in place to help ensure that that organization continues long term. And so we're going to talk about gaining commitment. The second being assessing the present needs. Like, how do we do that? How do we go about looking at what are the mission critical positions? Because again, as Janae said, not every position is critical. Not every position needs a full-fledged succession planning process. But there are going to be, when you start to look through the organizational chart, you're going to start to see, holy cow, if we lost this position tomorrow, we have nobody on the bench strength to help fill that, nor do we have anyone we could even just put in there temporarily. And when you work with organizations that go through those abrupt changes, like you mentioned, Janae, it is scary because all of a sudden there are business processes that were dependent upon those individuals. And that is also an issue that can be addressed from an operational standpoint. But when that person's plucked out, all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, we don't even know how those decisions were made. We don't even know the rubric which they used. We don't know who they talked to get that information. So it's very helpful to start to assess that ahead of time. And then the third step, appraising individual performance, deciding where they fit in this rubric we're going to talk about called the 9-box. The 9-box is pretty well established and used in this type of process. And so understanding how these individuals fit, what the future needs are from the organization. Again, understanding not only who we need to replace, but what skill sets need to be replaced. And then assessing their future potential. Again, that 9-box assessment, closing those gaps for that individual so that they are ready and sitting on the bench prepared to take the next steps. And we'll talk about several ways to do that, from mentoring to rotational assignments or job enlargement, those types of things. And then evaluating the results of your plan. Like, are we ready and are we better off today than we were when we started this process? And then again, continuing to gain that commitment and starting the process over again. I typically see this process inside an organization run on an annual cycle, but I have seen it on a shorter cycle. And I think that's better depending on how fast and furious you think you may need to get people ready. So doing a quarterly assessment to make sure people are on plan, making sure people are being reviewed, making sure they're still in place, right? We've lost somebody that was actually our second in command or ready to step up. And then we need to go ahead and start thinking about who else could maybe fill that role.
So when you think about the process, what we'd like for you to do is with your phone, drop a pin on the step of the process that you feel like you'd really like to learn more about today. Again, we could spend hours on this. We don't have hours. And so we really want to concentrate on the areas that y'all want to hear about the most. So we'll go with majority rules. So we'll need people to vote so that because we're going to walk through each step, but we'll go over some of them a little faster than others just for the sake of time.
So cool. I just love this. Watching all the dots and the interaction. I love it. The more interactive, the better.
I like it too, because a lot of times, you'll add, like, if we were to ask the question and we'd look at chat and we'd be like, because people like to do things anonymously and we don't know who is saying what. We just see what the answers are.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's funny that Tara and I, when we met about this, we're like, what do you think they're going to say? So
you'll have to tell us if that's accurate then, because
I don't know that we came up with a solution. I think we were like, well, we'll be prepared to talk about them all, but we did
I,
want it to be sort of choose your adventure kind
yeah,
of scenario because we could spend all day talking about
we
this stuff.
could. Yeah. I think we kind of said we think it's going to be steps 4, 5, and 6. It'll be some. So we're psychic. All
We're
right.
in
So
there.
it does look like the majority is on assessing future needs. But we'll kind of walk through that and talk about each one. But these others we're gonna talk about. We're just not gonna spend a ton of time on. So
And
um,
Julie said she wanted to talk about the transparency. So I like that too. I think that's one of the more challenging decisions for an organization to decide how transparent they're going to be about each of these steps. And it can go either way. I've
yeah.
seen it be completely in a vacuum and I've seen it be completely open. So
Well, and I think too, to speak on the transparency piece, and go back to like retention, sometimes people don't know that they might be part of your mental succession plan. And you're thinking, okay, I've got my eye on Tara. I'm going to really develop, but I don't talk to Tara and tell Tara that I'm doing it. So then Tara doesn't know, then Tara sees no room for advancement and Tara looks for a job somewhere else.
yes.
So that's another part to kind of think about the transparency. Okay. So we'll briefly walk through the other steps.
Is this me?
That's you. Just briefly. I think you've already kind of covered it. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I do. And just quickly, I will say if you're doing workforce development plans, this is a place where you can really use the data to gain commitment. That's how I typically try to do it, which is who do I have in retirement age? And is there going to be a big gap there? Do I have any growth coming down the pipeline for the company that's significantly going to leave us with some gaps? Do we have teams that need more autonomy? So we're going to split people off and there's going to be a leadership opportunity coming up. It's really being that strategic partner with your company and understanding where you're going as an organization and what you've currently got. And again, we talked about looking at the organizational chart and kind of going almost line by line down your organization chart. I know for me, when I worked in healthcare, it was really looking at the direct care staff. We knew we were going to be losing doctors. We knew we were going to be losing counselors. And in that way, we spent a good bit of time focusing on how do we work within that group. And we also spent a good bit of time on our compensation around that same thing. And then in education, it tends to be more that mid-level manager. You may have direct staff and you may have senior leaders, but that mid-level group kind of gets experience and then they move on. So knowing that you've got that challenge. And then oftentimes in manufacturing, I see things like finance and accounting tend to be more challenging because it's so nuanced in that area of manufacturing and trying to make sure that we are doing cost of goods sold at the right level and making sure that we're managing all that. So again, it's very organizational dependent, but if you're doing workforce planning, if you're doing strategic planning, those gaps will start to rear their heads. And then you can really say to people, well, if we had, succession planning, then we would have a plan for this. And I think that's one of the best ways to gain commitment.
Yeah, and I'm going to second that and say the data-driven part, it's not just because, hey, I went to a seminar and they said we should. It is having the data to be able to support why it's important and the impact of having the plan and not having the plan. So to be data-driven.
I think I mentioned to you, Janae, when we were talking about this, some organizations develop an ability to have insurance called key man insurance because they literally have to have money to step in when they haven't done succession planning.
Mhm.
And one way to sort of eliminate the need to do that is to have a robust succession planning and have 2 or 3 people ready to step in at any given point for those critical roles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Assess the present state. I'm trying to flip over to some notes really quick. Sorry. When we do assessing the current state, we're really looking at what is the need. And I kind of did cover that with sort of helping us gain commitment, which is looking to see exactly where our needs are going to fall. I worked for a power utility company at one point in my career, and they were saying at some point we're going to have no linemen to do the job. And it was a 4-year apprentice role to do. And so in that way, they knew what was coming down the pipeline. So understanding your present state, understanding the current condition of your demographics, like again, how many people are of retirement age, how many people are in this as a second job, how many people are of We had a childbearing age issue in one of our companies because we knew about 30% of our staff would be out for long periods of time because they were of that age. And it was a job that's what happened most of the time. The people were between 25 and 35. And so during that time, we knew we had to staff up and be prepared for that, as well as have a plan for our leadership to ensure they had succession planning. So again, looking at those things, trying to drive the data from your HRIS system and understand all the nuances of that. Some HRIS systems now are so amazing. They have this sort of predictive index of people who are sitting on that edge ready to turn over. And if you've got that kind of system, really using that to your advantage as well. But then also looking at the future of the organization. Where are we going? If we are diving into more technology, then we need to make sure we have people who can do that and understand that. If we've got financial systems that are so intricate and detailed, like you're doing county assessments or governmental reviews, those things tend to need people who have been in the system and understand it. So getting them hired early, starting them through a development plan, those are all the things that can help assess present state.
And again, I cannot stress at least when I first got into HR, I did not think about how important the data is. So like really looking at who's in that age group. And one of my clients that I work with, and I do this 8-hour session with, is the state of Mississippi. And so as I was presenting it to them, one of my data points, because I did my research, and Mississippi has a very strong state retirement system. And I gave them the breakdown that within the next 5 years, 45% of state employees in Mississippi are eligible to retire. 45%, right? So like look at the information now. The third step is appraising individual performance. So this is, again, something we could spend all day talking about. I am just going to go into it and believe that all of your organizations are doing performance reviews. I hope that they are. But also I hope that when we are doing performance reviews, we are giving honest feedback. One of the things that I have seen in my career is that people don't like to have those difficult conversations. And so they don't like to really analyze people's performance, but a good manager is going to do that. Also, side note, because I love to share this, something somebody said to me recently is that it's a performance review, not a performance reveal. So it is going over the performance for the past year and conversations you've already had as a summary. But you need to be doing this, because when we start thinking about strategic planning, what are we going to do? Who's going to do it? We've got to know who's capable of doing it, and not just capable because it's my best friend, but capable because they truly have the skills, the KSAs to be able to do it. Yes, performance development versus performance management. Yes. Wait, so let me read the whole question. Which means continual feedback and not a formal process. Right. And so part of that is when we talk about step 3, we're saying that if you kind of imagine it like branching off, those were like the big steps. But step 3 is something that goes on all the time. It's also not a one and done. So we're going to make sure that we are working with people, giving them the information that they need to be able to develop, not just a one-time performance management meeting, right? We want to be having those conversations all the time. Okay, so step 4, assessing future requirements. When you kind of think about, if you just stop and think about your organization 5 years ago and how things are different today, obviously we have, Lord only knows how AI is going to change all of our jobs, okay? And so that's one of the things that we need to think about. And if your organization kind of looks at the requirements and they say, oh, nothing's going to change, it's all going to be this way, it's been this way for 100 years, it's going to be this way in 5 years, not a good idea. We need to be able to accurately assess what we're going to need in the future. And so what we want to do is we want to kind of look around at the skills our people have. We want to look at where ultimately strategic planning, where we want to go, how we're going to get there, and the skills needed to get there. Then we're going through the succession planning process to make sure our people have the skills to help us accomplish. We go back to what business are you really in to be able to accomplish those goals.
This is my favorite part of succession planning because the way that I have typically done this is called our 9 box talent review. I mean, maybe you guys can populate the chat. Let me know if you've seen this or know about it. I don't want to over communicate it if it's something you're really familiar with, but this is a matrix in which you can assess high potential, high performance of each employee. And what I like to do is have my managers who are going to be involved in succession planning sit down with a group of employees and we calibrate together, meaning we have people from across a group that might be interacting with these employees and we assess where really do these employees fit on here? Do they fit in the future leader category where they are consistently performing and see the big picture and can do more and are currently doing well in their need, which is that top green box? Are they a growth employee? They have a high potential, but maybe their performance is just sort of mediocre. Maybe they need a little bit of a stretch assignment just to prove that they are able to step into the next level. Or are they over here on the far right side, high impact performer, where some growth is left in their current role, and yet we do see they have some potential. I'll stop and yes, calibration is critical. I can't say it enough because I may rate an employee one way and Janae may rate another employee, but if we could sit down and talk about and calibrate how they're doing collectively, we say two heads are better than one. So, sometimes two heads are just two heads, but in this process, you really get more feedback. It's almost like a 360 review at some level. I did this initially with, say, my senior executive team. And once we went through the first round, somebody asked, how often do we do this? We did this annually. And we did this based on the development plans we put in place. One thing I want to say about this, because this was one of the areas y'all want to spend some more time on, is making sure that you're really clear about the expectations. They may have a job description and they may do fine, but one of the things that I like to assess them according to the role they could step into in the next 2 to 5 years. So if you're a future leader, where are they according to the KSAs we think they need for that next job, not just the current job they're in? And so, how do we do that? One of the things we do is look at the next role. And I say collectively put in, if we're talking about the movement into a senior level job or the movement into an executive level job, which is often where I've seen this be most impactful, is that we start and look at knowledge of the industry, knowledge of the community, knowledge of the workforce, knowledge of the strategy of the business, right? And then we assess that person based on that. Then we look at skills, look at their financial acumen, look at their business acumen, look at their workforce development acumen, look at their knowledge of team development, metrics within the organization. And then what about abilities? Are they a good communicator? Are they good at executing on plans? Do they have good negotiating skills? Again, depending on what your business needs and what they need at that level, one of the ways to do that is to assess how many people who've been successful in those roles and look at what they're great at and say, we know in order to sit at this table and be successful at this level, you're going to need this broad base of KSAs. And if you have those knowledge, skills, and abilities in your back pocket, then we can look to see where we can plug and play with you in the future. And so I like to look at it not just as current role, but also a future role. And then again, going back to not every role is mission critical, I would limit your use of this and do it like cascade it through the organization, because sometimes it's overwhelming if you try to roll this out and everybody is going to be assessed on the 9 box. I would sort of say, well, let's decide where in the organization we think is most critical. We'll start there. Let's see how this works. Let's work out the kinks, the things that work in our organization and don't, because every organization is different. And so starting in one place and then allowing it to organically kind of cascade through the organization and back to transparency, deciding, okay, well, you are in this 9 box or you are in the 1 box. Having those conversations and saying, we see a lot of potential for you in the organization, that's the easy conversation. How do you keep somebody motivated or staying with you if you want them, if they're sitting in a core employee box or effective employee box, right? There's a room for people who are great. They're good at their job and they do okay, a steady Eddie, as we like to call them, right? Like those people who like to continue doing their job, they don't necessarily want, I want to read your question. What is the thought on transparent communication of where they're placed? I personally feel like it's to the advantage of the organization to be as clear and transparent as possible. There are, however, schools of thought, and I have to be really candid about this, where people are like, this is done in a vacuum and we don't talk about it, except for the fact that we acknowledge you're going to get an individual development plan, which we haven't talked about yet, but we will. We're going to have that, and that's going to be part of the growth and development. But if you're sitting in underperformer, that's dealt with in performance management or dealt with outside of this sort of succession planning process, because there's already questions and concerns about their performance. But I would ask Janae, what's your experience?
Well, and there was also there was another question about the low performer, high potential, and how that seems like a bit of an oxymoron. And what I want to say for that is they might be a low performer because maybe it's not, they might be great for the organization, but not in that role. So as a
Or they're
manager,
bored.
they're bored. Exactly. Like, there's some reason, like if they really do have high potential, but they're a low performer, there's some kind of disconnect there. And you have to kind of figure out what it is. Because they very well, you might move them, might give them additional tasks, different projects, that kind of thing, and you might see a totally different version of them. And I do want to say one of the things that Tara and I have talked about that I think is missing from this is interest. Because just because you have a future leader and they are up there in that corner, that does not mean they are interested in taking on additional responsibility. So part of that conversation is making sure that they're interested in being developed. Are most people interested? Yes. Most people, do they want to progress? Absolutely. But we've all come across those people that are very happy being those steady eddies and being right where they are and not progressing. So part of that is that conversation, that transparency to figure out what it is that they want before you spend too much time developing them and then they're not interested.
And I think it depends on how transparent your organization is on other things, right? If you're constantly having conversations about finances and the future of the organization and where you're going as a company, and I know companies that are, but I know lots of companies that aren't as transparent about those types of things. If you have an open, candid, transparent kind of company, then it's going to be expected that they would know where they sit on this box, right? Like, and if they don't, then they're going to wonder what you're hiding. But if you're in an organization where you feel like you can sit down and have a conversation and not necessarily throw the box out and say you're a 1 or a 2, but you can have the conversation and say, hey, look, we've decided as a group that you're really in an area where you could really be doing more. And here's what we're thinking about that. Then that's a conversation too. I actually know a company that puts their 9-box rating on their performance reviews. So they all know it. And they know exactly where their manager thinks they are. Wow. But if you go back to that conversation on calibration, that may not be how they're seen across the organization. And I think that is a piece that cannot be missing. Like that is one of my hanging points. Like, I just feel like you have to get in a room and talk about people collectively.
And that's a good place for 360-degree evaluations too, yes. Right? To be able to get that feedback. Okay, I'm going to keep going so that we stay at least somewhat on task. Wait a minute.
I'm not doing this one.
Wait, hold on. Did I do that? Hold on. It's like we somehow skipped one, but that's okay.
Close developmental gaps.
Yep. So step 6 is Tara's going to talk just a little bit about, but it's fine. Closing developmental gaps, because these are the ways that we want to do that. So
yes. So closing developmental gaps is really about the process, right? So we've included in your packet an example of an individual development plan that's been used and is part of a program, I think, that comes from One-Page Talent Management, but you can do targeted training programs. One thing I like about training programs is you can include a lot of people, but the next part about that is, again, Janae's the training guru over there, but having something that makes sure they're transferring that training. A one and done training is not effective. Like, you need to implement what you're training on, and having a way to do that through stretch assignments or job enrichment or mentorship, however you, as your organization, do that now. Another way to develop for the gaps or fill the gaps is mentorship and coaching. Assign them a direct coach. When we did it in one of the organizations that I was in. We made sure that there was a person assigned for each assignment we were trying to close the gap on. So if you were going to do a finance rotation, you had a person to work with in finance to ensure that there was some accountability for that sort of training and development. Rotational assignments. Also worked at a great company in Atlanta where the first HR director in that company was actually an engineer out of production. And that was because they wanted her to go through and learn all the positions in the company. And those are great and effective. It's a very expensive way in which to pull people out of high level positions and move them through the organization because you have to backfill them pretty immediately. But rotational assignments can be done ongoing or short-term rotational assignments, or you can give them a committee assignment. You're going to run the committee for, I don't know, team engagement or something. And so then they get some leadership skills if that's one of the gaps they need to close. And then you can send people out to get education if you want to send them to higher education. Again, we both teach at colleges or have taught in colleges. And so we get lots of people coming in for those sort of external education and certification processes, but you can develop those internally through your LMS system or tracking the 2 or 3 things you want them to learn, and they can actually be on a pathway within your LMS system and have to tick off those things. But again, bigger than going to the training, figuring out how to actually implement that and use those skills they're learning is even more important. So teaching somebody how to read P&Ls or financials is great, but if they don't do it very often, then the next time they pick up that P&L, they're going to be like, wait, where do I start again?
And from the learning aspect, I come at it from the position that we're giving you these different options because training, gathering 30 people in a training room, it's not going to work for everybody. My son just graduated from college and he got a job and has mechanical engineering, and the company that he's going to work for, he starts July the 14th, but they've already assigned him a mentor. And I'm like, that's so cool. That's so cool, right? Just to be able to have somebody kind of come in and teach him the ropes. So obviously, I love that. But one of the things about, like ask people about, are they willing to relocate? Because maybe they're not. It's having those conversations to find out not only do they have the potential, are they performing, but what do they want? What are they interested in? Because one of the drawbacks to succession planning is it takes a lot of time and can cost a lot of money. And so let's don't waste time or money on the wrong people. I just got it out of order. Technical difficulty. So this question, when you are thinking about bridging developmental gaps, which do you think is the most effective? So just take a second to answer that. And I'll share this while y'all are answering it. I do a lot of leadership training, and I get so frustrated when I get into the room and I've done my research and or I don't even get into the room. I'm on the call with the client and I'm like, why are they doing this? And they're like, we've got this one guy who's a real problem. And I'm like, well, have you talked to the one guy? No. I'm like, okay, well, that's step 1. Don't bring 30 people into the room. Let's talk to the one guy first, right? So yeah, coaching and mentoring. And Tara and I both, we've talked about this a lot. We both act as coaches, and we get so much out of that.
Yeah.
It's such a learning experience. Okay, so most of y'all that are going to answer have answered. So that's interesting. Really thinking about that coaching and mentoring and thinking about having that one-on-one makes a big difference. So let's talk about, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I wanted to add, particularly in developing, I have this on this slide, so if I'm out of order, Janae, you'd let me know. But if you're setting goals, and all of you've probably heard of SMART goals, specific, measurable, obtainable, realistic, time bound, any development plans need to have all of those elements because it can get really esoteric and really out there and not anchored in these sort of goals and having, when we talk about evaluating results, which we're going to do, how do you evaluate it if you didn't set a goal or have a trajectory to begin with?
Yeah. And how do you got to know on the front end how you're going to measure it. I've worked with managers that will say on performance appraisals, you need to have a better attitude. Okay, but how do I measure that? I'm like, how do we measure it? And so when we think about evaluating the results, I would be remiss if I did not mention the Coveyism to begin with the end in mind. And so we have to think about what we're trying to accomplish. So that goes back to our strategic planning, right? And as the succession planning as part of that, and really thinking about what it is we're trying to do to see if it's working. So for instance, if we have a real problem with retention and then people go and they take that organizational knowledge with them. Okay, then when we really need to start paying attention to our numbers, we implemented succession plan and are we seeing our retention numbers improve, that we're holding on to more people, turnover is lessening, right? We want to offer feedback mechanisms to be able to give people pulse surveys, engagement surveys, those kinds of things to find out how people are feeling about the process. Don't just assume. Don't listen to one person and say, oh, it's great, because some people may not like it. And so part of it being a process is evaluating all the time so that you can improve it as needed. Just think about what the performance metrics would be, and then think about how you incorporate this as part of your reviews. And again, planning for the future. Let's talk about just briefly about some mistakes and challenges. Some of these are listed on your handout. And again, there is some information on your handout that we're not going over today. But one of the problems that we see, one of the step one is gaining commitment. And so we're not going to gain that commitment. We're not going to keep that commitment if upper level leadership does not see that it's working. So we need to make sure we do everything we can to make sure that we keep that commitment. Sometimes people don't plan far enough ahead. And so they think, okay, we'll do the succession planning real quick. And it takes a lot longer than that. It's not a quick fix. It is meant to be that ongoing process. And also we have to keep in mind workload for people, because as we're talking about, okay, here's your job and you're going to take this rotational assignment too, and then they get overwhelmed and overworked. So make sure we are creating an environment where people feel they don't get to feel overwhelmed. They don't feel taken advantage of. And again, that's part of that transparency and having conversations with them and getting their buy-in to make sure that they're interested and making sure we go about developing them in the right way. Tara, did you have anything you wanted to add to that part?
I can't stress enough, which we've talked about a lot, having metrics. How are you gauging success in this program? How are you setting people up to know whether they're hitting the mark or not hitting the mark? How are you putting dates and timelines in place to know that you're hitting those milestones or not? Having an individual development plan for 20 people is no joke, a lot of work. And I'm saying 20 because even in a big organization, if you do it for too many, it's going to be, making everything a priority makes nothing a priority. So,
Mhm.
in my opinion, trying to narrow the scope of it, making sure that you're very, very intentional about who you're investing in each time. Maybe you have cohorts. And so there's like a cohort that goes through one time, and then the second, there's a cohort for the next group, or however you choose to do it. But again, having milestones and metrics are ultimately what's going to keep it moving forward, because your senior leaders are going to see that there's actually benefit, and the cost benefit analysis is going to be easy for them to pinpoint.
And there's the quote that I'm probably going to mess up, but what you don't measure, you can't manage. Something
Mhm.
to that effect. So we have to be able to measure it. Okay, so this will be a quick word cloud about what resources you think you need in order to make succession planning successful in your organization. Little redundancy there, that's okay. We've already established that, those of you that answered, we're kind of split into thirds as far as organizations that have succession planning, organizations that don't, and those that do but needed updating. And we'll just take a second to see if anybody wants to share what resources they think they need to be more successful at succession planning.
And also, I'll mention this real quick is a couple of questions about the handout. Anybody who is registered and attending the session today, I will make sure to resend the handout out as well when I send the recording of this video as well. So for everybody on, if you did not get the handout or registered late or were unable to click on this interactive thing that they have, I'll send the handout out afterwards.
And I will say this, the point about always start from business need and having leadership buy-in, that is exactly right. And that is why when we started today, business need, what are you trying to accomplish? What business are you in? Because you have to know that. And if you don't know that, you're going to end up not being super successful. We'll put it that way. Okay, so leadership buy-in, commitment, top-down engagement, validation of KSAs, that's so important. Robust IDPs. And so as
I'm
you think
loving
about
this
this,
word cloud.
I know it is so cool. I love it too. You know, clear goals. And so one of the things that Tara said, and I want to reiterate, is just because you think the expectations are clear doesn't mean that they are. And so that's part of transparency. It's part of communication. And don't assume that people know. They really need that communicated on a regular basis. And if you're one of those people, well, they should just know. Okay, that's not going to work. You've got to make sure that they know. Got to make sure that they know and understand what the expectations are. So this is great. And I'm going to keep going because we have one more question for you. So as we wrap up, obviously because we're going to have some time for more questions. And so, and I can include the interactive survey. I can send the results to the survey when we're done. But just take a second and, you know, tell us this is great information. You strongly disagree or you strongly agree. Plan to use what you've learned. And you'd like to use what you've learned, but you need some help. And please understand that we know this was like, I'm going to really age myself here. This is the Reader's Digest version. This is the Cliff's Notes version. Tara knows. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about, but that's okay. This is the condensed version. There's so much more information. And we just wanted to kind of share some important nuggets with you and get you interested, and note that we are a resource that we can help you if you need it. You can reach out to us, those kinds of things. But just to kind of give you more information today.
Great, and thank you. And also, and I want to address this kind of live also, a question that we have in terms of can we receive information on their full day class on this topic? When you show that slide that has all your contact information on there, when you get to that, make sure everyone is waiting. It's also as you mentioned, in the handout, it has the information, your contact information included as well. So that will be, they will include a slide here in a couple seconds, and also it's in the handout. So if you did not get the handout, reach out to me and I can send it. But like, as I mentioned, if you are on this webinar right now, I'll resend that handout out with the recording that I send as well.
And then we just have the objectives. These are the things we briefly talked about: succession planning, strategic planning, different approaches, understanding the process, evaluating, and then some mistakes to avoid. And then this is what Alice was talking about. So our email addresses are on here. If you're following along on your phone, you can just screenshot and you'll have it. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, however you want to contact us. But, you know, we would love to help you any way that we can.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. And
thank you so much.
And we can even, Tara, why don't we in the chat, let's type our email addresses.
Okay.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much for all this information, Tara and Janae. It's been great. And obviously, as I have said many a time, I love the interaction and it's been great. A little bit information about who we are. Talent Connections is a human resources executive search firm and consulting firm located in Atlanta, Georgia, founded in 1999. We also have a sister company, Career Spa, which provides career transition and coaching services tailored to each individual, helping you discover your career path and secure an advantage in this evolving, as we know, job market. So the websites are both up there in terms of talentconnections.net or careerspa.net. As we talked about in terms of the activity code that has been improved for the professional development credit recertification through SHRM, it is 25-CVUY7. So make sure you write that down as well. And for more information about certification or recertification, you can visit the SHRM website at shrm.org/recertification. Please remember to mark your calendars for our next Wednesday webinar, which will be Wednesday, July 9th. Once again, thank you so much to Tara and to Janae today for all of the great information. And we've had a lot of great information. See if there's anybody over here, any questions. You got your information. Thank you so much that you met in Mobile, Alabama, my hometown. Thanks very much. Thanks. Sorry, I missed the SHRM code. Can you repeat? Yes, that SHRM code is, Janae, if you can go back. Yep, 25-CVUY7. And so no worries. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we'll look forward to you next time.
Thank y'all so much. Everybody have a good
Bye-bye.
day.